Impossible to face someone else instead of me. Oh, always seems to know the way. Oh, I'll get you, and the world's alright with me. Oh, just wanna get you, and I know it's gonna be. Bill Withers wrote this song in 1973. Back then it was about the Vietnam War, which my father went to, and I understood it from the perspective of a kid who went to Desert Storm. And now it's 2018 and there's some young man in some war somewhere and he'll understand it his way. And that's just what it is. I mean, one thing I really like about this song is it's not really political. It's really about the conditions of the people that go, and reasons that we go. It's not political at all. It has more to do with our immediate
Hello and good evening. This is Andrew Dalton, the Executive Director of the Adams County Historical Society. Thank you all for joining me tonight for this very special program. It is our first program from quarantine. I hope you all are doing well. My best to all of our members and our supporters, everyone who tuned in. I see there's about 64 people right now watching, which is wonderful. I'm very excited that so many are interested in property research and some of the interesting things that we do at the Adams County Historical Society. If you're not already a member, I encourage you to go to our website, www.achs-pa.org. You can learn more about what we are, what we do, and you can join and become a member of the society. So, without further ado, I want to get into our topic for tonight. And I should point out, we have some people watching the comments. I think our historian Tim Smith is watching. So if you have any questions throughout the program, please do not hesitate to ask. I will try my best to monitor the questions and answer them to the best of my ability. But really what I want to talk about tonight is one of the three main components of what we do at the Adams County Historical Society when people come in to do research. We run a research archive. I'm sure many of you have visited. And that is help people understand more about the history of their homes, or their farms, or any other historic structure or property in Adams County. And it's really one of the most difficult forms of research to do, I think, for beginners who are just starting out and learning the tricks of the trade. But I want to kind of go through some of the basic tenets of property research and how you can learn more about your historic home in Adams County, whether you own the home or you're just interested. So I am going to move on here. Hopefully our PowerPoint presentation will work. So first, I'm going to go through just a few basic questions that a lot of folks have about property research. And one of them is, people ask us, how old is my house? And this is a really difficult question to answer. Records, especially early on, are very hard to find in terms of a solid construction date for a property. So oftentimes we'll be asked to come up with an exact date, and a lot of folks think when they come into the Historical Society that we have a file on every single property, every house in the county. And we don't. A lot of times, most of the time, actually, we're going directly to the records to find out as much as we can about a property, and sometimes we find the construction date, sometimes we don't. Another main question is, who has owned my house over the years? This one's a lot easier to answer. You can use deeds and tax lists and other records that we're going to look at in a few minutes to determine who owned a house or a property over a period of time. And then who lived in the house. Sometimes the occupants of the house are different from the owner, and it can be sometimes easier to learn about who lived in the house than it is to figure out who owned it, or vice versa. Sometimes it's very easy to identify the owners, and very hard if there's a renter living in the house to know who was living at a certain property at a certain time. I hope the volume is okay. If anyone is having any trouble hearing, please let me know and I can turn it up. And then finally, did anything interesting happen at my house? That's another great question that we get. People want to know, obviously, what happened. Was somebody murdered in my living room? Did somebody die and was buried in the backyard? Or maybe less morbid, was there some sort of event associated with my house, a celebration or a church gathering, or, maybe the house burned down, or, there was an addition built onto the house. And so, we help people try to locate some of these interesting stories, and sometimes the stories are even better than the folklore that is associated with many historic properties. Our favorite, of course, is that people claim their house was on the Underground Railroad, which is possible, but the documentation for that is always a little bit difficult to prove. Anyway, so these are some basic questions. I'm going to move on to just where you start if you're interested in a property, how you go about, learning the very basic details. And some of this is kind of, obvious, like Google Maps, for instance. a lot of Google Maps has Street View, and you can go to the exact location and look at the house. A good idea, to start out, and what we will usually do when we first begin a property research, is to look at the house or the property, see what is there now, and then try to compare it to historic maps. And a good way to find out, if you don't know where the property is to look at the Adams County Tax Parcel Viewer. Now I'm going to try to get this up on the screen here, and we will take a look. So here is, as soon as it loads, the Adams County Tax Viewer. You can find this by looking for, if you just go on Google and type in Adams County Tax Parcel Viewer, you will find this map. You can select it, OK, and then take a look at it. So basically, this is the modern tax map for Adams County. And it shows every single property in the county, who owns the property, and most importantly, it shows the most recent deed reference. So if you're looking into the history of a property, one of the most important things is to find out who owns it now, and find the most current deed, which then you can use to trace the deeds back and find the older, more exciting deeds from the time of the Civil War or even earlier. So I'm going to use an example here. Let me go to, let's just pick a random house in Gettysburg here. Let's pick something on Broadway. How about we'll pick the big brick house at the corner of Broadway and the Harrisburg Road. I'm sure some of you know it was a hospital during the Civil War. It was the president of Pennsylvania College's home for a long time. So let's look at this. It's now owned by Gettysburg College. And you'll notice every single property has this criteria listed. It gives the sale date. It gives the land value, the building value. Sometimes it gives the purchase price. I think it's $1 in this case. Somebody liked the college very much, I think. And it will give the most recent deed reference. So this is a deed from 1994. And you see I've highlighted the reference, 997-0173. So what this is saying is that the deed is on page 173 of book 977. So what does that mean, and how do you actually go about finding the deeds? Now this part, this part requires a subscription to actually look at the modern deeds. So the Adams County has a website with every single deed that's ever been recorded. It's through the courthouse, and the subscription is a little bit expensive. So we actually have a subscription at the Historical Society. Unfortunately, during the quarantine, you won't have access to it, but you can come into the Historical Society at any point and use this index, and that's what I'm going to show you now. So let me go back to the PowerPoint, and let's look at the Adams County. Oh, actually, it's on the next slide. I'm going to advance the slide. I'll skip a little bit forward. Let's see, where is it? Adams County. It is the, I might not actually have a link to it. So let's just go directly to, the internet, and I'll show you how to get to that. So we'll go back to the internet. So this database is maintained by the Register and Recorder of Adams County. It is called, I think the title is just landrecordspa.adamscounty.us. So as I said, there's a paid subscription for this to access this database. But let's sign in, and then let's take a look at the deed that we just pulled up on the map. So I'm going to go back to the map for a second. It's page or book 977, page 173. 977. So we're going to go in and put in book 977, 173, and search. And then it will bring up the current deed for, I believe, the Crawford House, as it's known today. And you'll see a 9-page deed. And we're going to put this video on YouTube too, in case I'm going a little too fast with the clicking. But this is the deed. So it says a deed of distribution, the 15th of December, 1994, between Charles Wolfe, executor of someone's last will and testament, to Gettysburg College. And so here is the deed. And if you scroll through the deed, you'll see all kinds of great information, a description. And what's really interesting for our purposes is the next section. it is the recital, or the chain of title, as we call it. This will give you a history of the property over time. So, and it will give you another really important piece of information, which is the last deed reference. So we're going to hop from this deed to the previous deed. And it's a little complicated, I see here, because it looks like this tract was split into several properties. Sometimes you have to chase down each one of those lines. But in this case, let's just take a look at one. So you can go back 476 to 39. So 476 to 39 and search, and then here is the deed before that from 1987. And basically what you'll do is you'll just go through deed to deed to deed and record all the information for when the property transferred. And a lot of times you can get this back to the 1930s or 40s, or even into the 1870s and 80s. In some very rare cases, you can trace a deed all the way back to, the early 1800s. Although it is not always easy to find the deed reference once you get back into the 1920s and 30s. Sometimes they're not very good at listing the references. They'll just list a chain of owners that may go back to the early 1800s. But you have to go back from deed to deed. If you'll notice back on the home screen of this database, there's a tab called Online Index Books. This has the older deed books prior to 1937, I believe. And we actually own a lot of those original, or at least we hold a lot of those original deed books at the Adams County Historical Society. If you've been in to do research, you may be familiar. So let's look at that just for 1 second. If you see over here on the right of the screen, deeds, and then A, you can go from A and through book 144. So if you're not familiar with our deed books, they go from A to Z, and then they start with double letters. And then they go all the way up to the end of the double letters, and they start with book 53, God knows why, all the way through 144. And then the more modern ones are searchable through the other part of this database, which is book and page, where you can put in the exact book and page number, or you can actually search by name under the name tab. So don't worry if you didn't catch all of that. This database is a little bit hard to get used to, but we have access to it at the Historical Society, and we can easily help you go through and find all the deeds for your property from the modern deed as far back as possible. So let me go back to the PowerPoint for a minute here, and we'll look at just a couple other resources related to the location of your property. So I'm going to switch it back to the PowerPoint. As I said, Google Maps is very useful, but we also have some historic maps that are oftentimes very helpful, especially when you've already looked through the deeds and you want to match up the property on a map with what it's saying in the deed books. So for instance, if it's funny that I picked the Crawford house, because this is actually another farm owned by the Crawford family that is now owned by the Borrett family. Shout out to Jake Borrett if you're watching. But this is the Crawford farm, and you can use historic maps then to ensure that what you see in the deeds is accurate. So in other words, if a Crawford owns it, you'll want to find that property on the historic maps and make sure that the Crawford is listed at that property. So let's look first at the 1858 Adams County wall map. Now this is a fascinating document. It's really the first map ever drawn that is specifically of Adams County, showing where folks lived at that time. And hopefully the map will load for us. Looks like the Library of Congress website is being a little bit problematic right now. I'm going to search for another copy of it, and hopefully we can load one of those. Here's my favorite, actually, but it might not be working right now. Let's go to this one. Looks like the LOC is having some problems tonight. If not, if this doesn't work, we'll go to the internet. Yeah, let's just go. I'm just going to Google 1858 Adams County map. Usually the Library of Congress site works, but it looks like they're having a glitch tonight. So let's look at Google Images. I'm sure it'll come up. So here is the 1858 Adams County wall map. Now this is the map that was widely distributed throughout Adams County in the 1858-59. I think I may have forgotten to switch it back to the internet. Sorry, we're all getting used to this technology. So I'm going to switch it back so you can actually see what we're looking at. I'm going to verify the internet is actually visible right now? Yes. Okay. So let's go to the internet and just look. This is Google Maps, and you can see what the Adams County 1858 map looks like. It's separated by township, and then there are some small insets of the town of Gettysburg, the town of New Oxford, and you can see the actual property owners. It's funny that the Library of Congress is almost never down. But oh, nope, still down. Let me see. I'm going to try one more thing because I do want to show you what it looks like blown up. I'm going to go back to just a regular Google search here and see if we can find maybe through, oh, there we go, through PHMC. Very good. So let's zoom in here and look. This is the Gettysburg and Cumberland Township section. And if we zoom way in, you can see how each structure is labeled. Sometimes you'll see very creative phonetic spellings of people's names, especially the Germans who were very spoken very broken English by many accounts in the Gettysburg area. So you'll see Gettysburg is not actually labeled in detail, but if you go to the outside of the map, in the inset section, there is a pretty detailed map of Gettysburg. And you can zoom in and look at different structures. Now, the map is not actually labeled individually for each house. So really the early owners of the houses in Gettysburg, you have to seek other sources to find that. So let's go back to the PowerPoint, and I'll make sure I actually switch it back this time. Here is the PowerPoint with some other resources. So the next map that you would want to consult to see who owns your property or who is labeled at the site of your property is the 1872 Atlas. So let's take a look at that for a minute. So the 1872 Atlas is split up into segments for each town and township. And you can scroll through and look. Let me switch it to, yeah, there we go. We're still getting used to this. So you can switch and look through. You can you can go to this website, which is Historic MapWorks, and you can look at a full copy of the 1872 Adams County Atlas. Let's just, for instance, let's look at Gettysburg, and let's look at that same property that we had looked at a few minutes ago. Now you'll notice the same thing here. A lot of structures are not labeled. And actually the house at the corner is not shown. It may be in Cumberland Township. So I'm going to look there. Cumberland Township. We'll look right at the edge of Gettysburg and see if we can find that. It looks like it is still not labeled, which looks like they may have missed it on this map. That's another thing. I mean, these maps are not, they're not foolproof, and there are a lot of structures that end up not shown for various reasons. So you can't just assume that a structure was or wasn't there based on one map. So this is the 1872 Atlas, really the first main coverage of the county after the Civil War. Between 1858 and 1872, there were no county-wide surveys done. So we really don't have a very good idea of who lived where throughout the county during the Civil War and the Battle of Gettysburg. We have other maps that show the Gettysburg area, but in terms of the entire county, we have 1858 and 1872, and that's pretty much it. And feel free to, I am watching the comments if anyone has any questions so far. It looks like Tim Smith is also monitoring the questions, so if anyone has anything, please feel free to let us know. So let's go back and look again at our PowerPoint here. So one other final source that you can use that a lot of people don't really know about that I find fascinating is a website called Penn Pilot. And this is a website set up by Penn State University. And what they've done is they've taken aerial surveys from overhead planes from 1937, 1957, 1971. I think we might be having some technical difficulties. Are we having any problems? Just one second. Maybe we're stuck on. Yeah, okay, I think we're good now. Let me go back to what I was saying here. Sorry, bear with us as we learn about this. Penn Pilot, again, like I said, they're using aerial surveys from planes that flew over in 1937, 1957, and 1971. So I'm going to go to that website now, and I'm going to attempt to switch back to the internet. And let's take a look at what that is. So this is what the Penn Pilot site looks like. And when you first get to it, you can type in Gettysburg or Biglerville. Let's go to something obscure. Let's go to Mummersburg, Pennsylvania. Sure, some of you know Mummersburg is a small town. I guess you could call it a town. No offense to anyone from Mummersburg. North of Gettysburg, just about a few miles northwest. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on Mummersburg just a bit. And then where you see select era up here at the top, where I've highlighted, you can select the period of time where you'd like to view the aerial images. So I'm going to look at 1937, and you'll see these red dots appear. You can click on one of these red dots, and then you can download a high-resolution image that was taken. I guess this flying date is September 24th, 1937, and you can download a high-resolution copy of that image. And you can zoom in and look at the various properties, and especially for farms, this is really great because you can see where woodlots were located, original property lines, fences. I think the image, I don't know if we're going to be able to actually open the image right now, but this is a small thumbnail. Or here we go. Yeah, this is the image in high resolution. I'm going to zoom in on the town of Mummersburg, and you can see the quality might not be great if you're watching on a phone or a laptop, but if you go to the website and actually do this, you'll see wonderful high resolution aerial views of any part of Adams County. And again, that's from the 30s, the 50s, and the 70s. And you can compare all of those and see if the structure that you're looking at is there on each of those images. Someone says they live on Seven Stars Road. Maybe we will check something out there in that neighborhood later. Okay, I think the sound is good. I know some people are having some sound issues. I will try to turn up my mic just a little bit here in case that might be a problem. So if anyone thinks it's too loud now, you might want to turn down your phone or your computer. But I'm going to bump up the volume here. Okay, let me go back to our PowerPoint. And let's look at the next section of the program here. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is really just a slide to demonstrate the volume of maps that cover the town of Gettysburg and the immediate area around Gettysburg. Now, of course, because of the battle, we have a very unique situation in Adams County where there was just so much coverage of the Gettysburg area following the battle. And you can see that here. On this slide. So I'm just going to briefly read through it. So we have an original lottery map, town lot map from 1785. That's actually on animal hide in the collections of the Adams County Historical Society. Then there's an 1850 map of Gettysburg that does label many of the structures. Again, that's something you have to visit us to look at. We already looked at 1858. The next two maps were both drawn in 1863, and both are available online. Then in 1864, there's a burial map of the battlefield drawn by S.G. Elliott. You can find that on the Library of Congress, LOC, as I have indicated. And then in 1868 and 69, probably the most detailed survey of the Gettysburg area that had ever been done, and probably that had been done. I don't think there was another detailed survey like this ever done of the Gettysburg area, labeling just about every fence line, stone wall, clump of trees, everything you could imagine. It was done by Gouverneur Warren and a team of engineers to document the Gettysburg battlefield in 1868 into 1869. And we have copies of the Warren map at the Adams County Historical Society. You can find it on the Library of Congress if you type in Warren map Gettysburg. Probably at some point we'll do another talk about maps in Gettysburg, which is one of my favorite topics. So maybe we can do that in a couple weeks if the quarantine continues. 1878 we talked about. And then there's a series of Sanborn fire insurance maps that Penn State has digitized. Now, the town of Gettysburg, almost every structure was insured through the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company. And they would create periodic maps that actually show whether a structure is wood, whether it's brick, whether, where the chimney is located, where the windows are located. They're exceptionally detailed maps. And there are a couple for Littlestown, McSherrystown, and I think there is one at Biglerville, which we have access to at the Historical Society. So you can check out all of those resources at ACHS, or as I indicated here on the slide, a lot of it is online. I think I got everything. There's a few obscure maps, like in 1888, there was a bird's eye view done of Gettysburg. That's just a beautiful map. If the Library of Congress were working right now, I would show you, but hopefully we will get back to the topic of maps in another webinar. So if your house is in Gettysburg or nearby, you're in luck because there's just so much coverage of the Gettysburg area. If you're out further in Adams County, you really have to rely on the two maps that we already discussed, 1858 and 1872. So let's continue now into some of the meat of how you research a property in Adams County. So really the first thing you want to do, and we already demonstrated this earlier, is you want to start with the current deed and work backwards. As we showed, the county website is a good resource for that. And you can easily go through from deed to deed and get back pretty far pretty quickly. The fact that they digitized all of those deeds has really transformed the way that we do this research, because it makes it so much faster. I see a question about adding links for all these maps. Yes, we're going to post this video on the Facebook page and on YouTube, so you can copy that information. But yes, for all of those maps, we can absolutely add links. If you'd like to email us or leave a comment, we'll be sure to add some links, especially to the Sanborn fire insurance maps and some other resources. So if Tim Smith is watching, maybe he can add a couple links into the comment section, or we can do it after the broadcast is over. So a couple other things that you may not know of that we have at ACHS that can sometimes fill in some gaps are we have unrecorded deeds. So not every deed was recorded. A lot of times if you're researching a house, you can look in a collection of deeds that we have that were kind of done off the books, and they're not official deeds that were officially created at the Adams County Courthouse in the Register and Recorder's office. There's a lot of deeds like that, especially between family members, and we have a huge collection of those deeds, and we still take them today when people turn them in. And then another huge resource that can really help, especially if you're trying to find out when transfers happened and there's no deed, is tax lists. At the Historical Society, we're the official custodian for all the county records that are, considered early county records. We have tax lists for every single town and township in Adams County for every single year from 1800 all the way through 1953, I believe. And so you can look in every single year and see who owns property, how many acres they have, and occasionally, more often than not, there will be personal notes that say new house, new barn. And so you could sometimes get a really solid date of construction by looking through our tax lists. And they are the original books. So it's always fascinating to handle them and carefully page through and look at these resources. We also have copies of pre-1800 tax lists, so you can really trace the history of your property back into the days of when Adams County was part of York County. So let's move on. Another question, as I said, that probably the most common question that we get is, when was the house built? And I have a picture here of I couldn't find an older picture of construction, but this is one of the dorms being built at Gettysburg College. I think it's Stein Hall. Shout out to any other fellow Gettysburg College graduates who are listening. Oh, great. I think Tim is on answering some comments. So if you have any other comments, please feel free to let us know. So when was the house built? As I said, it can be hard to figure this out, but we have some resources that if you're lucky, you can get a really solid date of construction. So newspapers.com is actually the website of choice for me and for some of my friends at ACHS who do this research a lot. I just find it to be a really excellent resource, and the search engine is very good, and you can easily find newspaper articles and keywords from pretty much all eras of newspapers in Adams County. So sometimes there will be a reference in the newspaper that says, so-and-so built a house on Springs Avenue. It's 2 stories in brick, and it looks really nice. And usually those notices will be in a column of weekly happenings in the county. More so in Gettysburg than other parts of the county. Again, I'm sorry to those of you who aren't from Gettysburg, but Gettysburg is typically covered more than the rest of the county. And then, like I said, tax lists. You'll see a note occasionally that tells you exactly when a house was built. And it's important to note that our tax lists usually reflect the prior year, just like taxes do today. So if you're looking at the tax book for 1863 and it says new house, the house was likely built in 1862. And thanks to our friends I see at Gettysburg National Military Park for their comment. That's very nice. We're always happy to work with our good friends at the park. So a couple other resources: ads and sales notices. So at the Adams County Historical Society, we actually have a detailed card file that's filled with just about every reference to a property transfer or a sale of any kind that was in the newspaper for property. So you can actually look through by the owner's name and see if there's an article about your property, whether it was sold either from one person to another, or if it was sold at a sheriff sale and your prior owner went bankrupt and it was given over to the sheriff, which was a pretty common thing actually at the time, as it is now. And then estate records. We actually have the wills, the original wills and estate documents for just about everyone who owned property in Adams County back to 1800. And more often than not, when someone dies with property, they'll have a description of that property listed in the estate papers. So you can find that information at the Adams County Historical Society. It can sometimes really help. And then maps, as we discussed, if you see a map and the house is there, you know that the house was built by that date. But you have to be careful because, a lot of times buildings were replaced or they burned down or were torn down, and a new structure replaced the old structure right at the spot. And so, you shouldn't always assume if it's on a map that that's the same as today. But if you have a map like the Warren map or the Sanborn map that says 2-story brick house, and there's a 2-story brick house today, you can be pretty certain that it's that house, unless there's, reason to disbelieve that. So another set of questions: who lived in the house and when? So here are some resources to figure out who's living in your home. I find this to be the most compelling part of property research because, if you live in an old home or a new home, I think most people are genuinely curious about who lived there before them and what their lives were like, what may have happened in their families, good and bad, and you can find all kinds of information that way, which is very, I think the human interest side of it's very interesting. So where do you start with that? So by now, if you've followed kind of the steps that we've laid out, you probably have an idea of who owned the property and when they owned it over a period of time. And you've probably seen on a map that the property owner is listed there. So that's good. You know that John Smith owns this house from this period to this period, and you saw that he's listed on a map. So then what you want to do is go to the United States Census and see if you can find that family at that property. So for using the census, what you'll want to do is go to Ancestry.com. And for those of you who haven't done this, I'm going to switch back to the internet for a minute and just show you how you do this. So Ancestry.com, if you don't have a subscription, and you're interested in this type of research, I would recommend getting it because Ancestry is just as good, I think, for property research as it is for genealogy. So what you'll want to do is go to the search button, and then you'll see all kinds of resources, but here we have census and voter lists. So if you click there, you will see basically a list of all the different censuses over here. You can narrow by category, by century. So just for this purpose, we're going to go to 1800s. And then let's look at the 1860 census. So I'm going to go to U.S. and we're going to go to, I'm just going to type in the box here, keyword 1860, and hopefully it will come up. 1860, let's see. Usually I just go to Google and type in 1860 census. Let's actually go back and do it that way. So if you have an Ancestry account, you can just type in 1860 census Ancestry. I'm not sure why it wasn't in that list there, but I'm sure some of you who are better at ancestry than I am would have an answer to that. But 1860 census ancestry, and then you can actually click on a page that takes you directly to that census. And let's just search for, since Tim Smith, our historian, is watching, let's search for his favorite citizen of Adams County, John Burns, the hero of Gettysburg. So we're going to look for John Burns, and we're going to look for him in Gettysburg. So if you start typing in a place, it'll automatically give you the option to select Gettysburg in Adams County. Of course, there's a few different Gettysburgs, and so you want to make sure you're searching in Pennsylvania, not South Dakota. So John Burns in Gettysburg in 1860, search, and we got nothing. So let's broaden the search, and if Tim's watching, he's probably going to comment and say something like, oh, John Burns lived in Cumberland Township. So let's narrow it to the county. And here we go. We've got John Burns in Mount Pleasant, born 1800 in New Jersey. And, I think I probably should have read Tim's book more carefully to know that John Burns was living at this property prior to living in the town of Gettysburg, where he is famously living at the time of the battle. So here he is, Mount Pleasant Township. Here's John Burns, age 60. Barbara Burns. It says he's a boot and shoemaker. He's born in New Jersey. So there you go. You can look at the census, and what you want to do when you open the census first is make sure you note the township, and then you can actually look and see who's living nearby. So there's an Alexander Shorb living nearby, a Conrad Wagner living nearby, a John Rosenberger living nearby. And notice that the people, all of John's neighbors, have a value listed for real estate. This guy has $5,500. That means he owns his property. This one has $600, probably owns his property. Burns, on the other hand, is listed with no real estate value. So it's likely, if not certain, that John Burns was a renter at this time. Before he moved to Gettysburg. So we have John Burns on the census, and what you can actually do then, let's say your ancestor is listed as a renter, or you suspect that this person lives in your house, but they're not actually listed with real estate. You can actually go to the map and find Alexander Shorb, find Conrad Wagner, find John Rosenberger, and then try to figure out based on that where this renter may be living. It's not always easy, and you can't be sure of it, but it often can be really helpful to look at that map in 1858 or 1872. So here we have John Burns on the 1860 census in Mount Pleasant Township. So I'm going to go back now to the PowerPoint, and hopefully it will work for us. There we go. So we've been through the census. Again, you can find any census on Ancestry from 1790 to 1940. Now, keep in mind that they didn't actually list everyone in the household until 1850. So the earlier censuses, you can only get the head of household. But the census is always done in the order of the census taker walking around. So it's fascinating that you can actually look at a historic map and trace the footsteps of the census taker as he's moving from house to house. And that's how, in some cases, we've been able to identify a renter, because there's only one possible house where the census taker, it was right on their path, and they had an owner, then a renter, and then an owner. And we know that the one house that we didn't know who lived there must be that renter. So let's look at a couple other resources. At the Historical Society, we also have a special census. And this was called the Septennial Census. It was taken every 7 years. And it doesn't have full households, but it does have the head of household. And that is one way to figure out whether your property owner is actually living in the place where he owns his property. To elaborate on that, there's a few other resources. So the directories. I listed years where we have a directory at the Adams County Historical Society that lists who lives at each property. Now, keep in mind, though, that addresses were not actually really assigned until much later. And so, in the town of Gettysburg, for instance, I think it isn't until 1910 where they start actually listing the street address. Before that, it's just a list of people in order of, the census. But the early censuses, 1860, 1888, the early directories, the early directories will list the person's name, and it may list what street they live on, but usually the early ones are just going to list the occupation and the name of the head of household. And then finally, one other interesting resource here is something that's brand new, really. to research, and it's the Pennsylvania death certificates. So Ancestry.com began digitizing original Pennsylvania death certificates a few years ago, and they now have every single certificate digitized from 1906 to 1967. So you can actually go on Ancestry.com, and I'm going to do this right now. And you can, well, we'll go to the internet. We'll type in Pennsylvania death certificates ancestry. And the first result here is Pennsylvania death certificates. And let's look for someone. Let's look for a pretty prominent member of Gettysburg's Black community, Basil Biggs. And this was actually one of the first certificates I found when I opened this new database for the first time, and I was just thrilled that they had his certificate. He died in 1906, which was the first year that they kept death certificates for the state of Pennsylvania. So we'll go to Basil Biggs' death certificate. If you're not familiar with Biggs, he actually lived on the Crawford farm over on Marsh Creek during the Battle of Gettysburg, and he was prominent in the reburial and disinterment of the dead on the battlefield, and I should say burial in the National Cemetery. He had a team of African American laborers who were, doing this incredible work, and in digging up bodies and reburying them. So Basil Biggs, well known, and also an incredible local veterinarian, an early kind of pioneer as a veterinarian in Gettysburg. His family ended up then later fighting for integration of the schools in Gettysburg, which is just a wonderful, an incredible story. So we see here Basil Biggs, and this one is a little bit less specific. So it says place of death, Adams, Gettysburg. Later on, they would start actually listing the house number, but this will give information about the person who died, including where they're buried, and it will give the mother and father's names. So if you're interested in the people who lived in your house, there's a good chance you could find a bunch of death certificates for folks who lived in your house at one point or another. Let me go back just so we can find a more modern one. I'm going to look for someone who died more recently. I'm going to look for anyone who died, and this is another great feature. You can look for anyone who died in Adams County. Let's get Pennsylvania. It's funny that as many times as I've typed it in, it still will not default to Pennsylvania. So Adams County, Pennsylvania, and let's find somebody who died in 1935. That's a good one. Or let's do 45 just to be sure that we get a street address. So here's somebody who died in Gettysburg. Gene Hertz died in 1945 in Gettysburg. If we view the record, you'll see, and I'm hoping this is just random right now, but it will give the place of death. In this case, it's the Annie M. Warner Hospital, but it will give over here the residence of the deceased. And this person lived at 243 Baltimore Street in Gettysburg. So another resource to figure out who's living in your house at a certain point in time. Now we'll go back to the PowerPoint. I'm going to wrap things up here in a minute, just so anyone can ask any questions they might have. Someone pointed out that is correct, that Pennsylvania residents can access the death certificates free of charge through PHMC. So if you want to look at the comment section, I see someone very nicely pointed out that there is another database. I'm not sure if we've actually visited that, so thank you for bringing that to our attention. So this covers who lived, in a house and at what point. And then finally, I want to talk about good stories and how do you find some really interesting things. Because, if you know who lived there, you know their names, you know when they were born, you know when they died, what the structures looked like, whether they were brick or wood, or, you might even know when it was built, but you might not know anything about the people who lived there. And so without that, it can be a little bit bland. So how do you find out, what these people were like and, what they did for a living and whether they had any incredible experiences at your property? And because we are in Gettysburg and Adams County, it is very likely that there was something pretty incredible that happened either at your house or in your neighborhood. Assuming that your house was around at the time of the battle. So how do you find out these stories? First, before we talk about what's on the screen, there are hundreds, thousands of obituaries in the Gettysburg Times for folks who lived in Gettysburg during the Civil War period. If you were a little girl or a little boy during the Battle of Gettysburg, you would have lived into the 1940s, 50s, or even 60s. And so sometimes these obituaries are full of fascinating information about the person that may specifically reference your house. When Tim Smith and I have worked on houses in Gettysburg, we'll often find the obituaries of all the children who lived in the house during the battle and see if there's any reference to their experiences during the battle. Obviously, it was a very traumatic experience that stuck with these folks for the rest of their lives. And, living through the Battle of Gettysburg or witnessing the Gettysburg Address and shaking the hand of President Lincoln was something that would go in your obituary in many cases. And sometimes you'll find interviews as well. But a few resources that we have or that you can find online are damage claims. So Pennsylvania Civil War damage claims. If your ancestor or your property owner that you're looking at owned property in Adams County, there's a good chance if it was near Gettysburg or even, west or north of Gettysburg for the most part, there's a good chance that you can find a damage claim for that property. So let's go back to Ancestry.com, and I'm going to search Civil War damage claims Ancestry. And we have Pennsylvania Civil War border claims, 1868 to 1879. So if you click on that, it will let you search. So let's say I'm going to look for someone whose house we researched not too long ago. Let's just search, what do we know is going to come up? Let's search Burns. I don't think John Burns filed a claim, but let's see what we find. If there's nothing, we'll try somebody else. Actually, nobody from Adams County here. Let me go back. I'm just going to search one that I'm sure there will be a claim for. So let's try somebody in the town of Gettysburg or the immediate vicinity. Let's try a Sheeds. Here we go. This is Charles Schultz or Schutz. This is fine. Actually, I'm going to go back. Let me get a good one. Here we go. This is the front page, or this is the index. So there's actually an index for each claim, and you can look through the index and see, but it is easier in most cases just to search. You'll see it lists the person, the township that they lived in, and then it'll list where their post office was. So you can see all the Adams County people here, and here's a Mummersburg person. Here's somebody in Cumberland Township. Actually, the one I do want to search, I just remembered one that I really like, and it's Kitzmiller. I think it's Samuel Kitzmiller. They lived in a White House on Broadway in Gettysburg, which is the only Civil War house, I believe, on that street. Kitzmiller, I think it'll come up if I search it. And it was a toll house. It's at the corner of the Mummersburg Road and Broadway, for those of you who know Gettysburg. So let's look at Samuel Kitzmiller Jr. I'm pretty sure this is the claim. And we know the house that they're living at. We know that they're renters at this property. And I'm just going to page through the claim. So this is the cover sheet of the claim. And I want to go through and look specifically at one part where they list the items that were taken or destroyed from the house. So it'll say blankets, aprons, a revolving pistol, preserves. So sometimes if you're lucky and your house was ransacked during the battle, they weren't lucky, but you might be now if you're interested in this stuff. You can find a list of what was actually inside your house at the time of the battle, which I think is fascinating. And it'll list everything in extreme detail. And one of my favorite things about this particular claim is that they say in the claim, in the list of what was lost, that the Confederates stole 2 books on the history of slavery. Or at least one book, and then the other's Byron's works, which seems to be a religious or literary compilation. But there's a book about slavery that was destroyed or taken away by the Confederate Army from this home on the edge of Gettysburg, likely on the first day of the battle. Usually these will be followed by, the list continues here, it'll be followed by sworn statements from neighbors. So this one is John Beam, was sworn that he is well acquainted with Samuel Kitzmiller and that the rebels occupied the house he lived in with his father during the 3 days of the Battle of Gettysburg, that said house was completely stripped of all kinds of goods usually kept in a private house, that it was inside of the enemy's lines, that 2 shells went through it, and that it had to be abandoned by its occupants, that when the rebels left, the house was completely stripped of everything which could be carried away, that he believes, from what he saw, being a neighbor of the said claimant, that the rebels took the property in the foregoing petition, mentioned in the foregoing petition, that the valuation of the property is just and moderate, and that he has no intent in the claim. So there's John Beams giving a testimony and a first-hand account of what happened at this house during the battle. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of claims that were filed, if not in the hundreds. And we have access to a lot of them on microfilm at the Historical Society, and some, but not all, are on Ancestry.com. So let's go back to the PowerPoint for a brief moment. So make sure we're back. We are. So another resource that I would recommend looking at is, if you visit the Adams County Historical Society, we have hundreds of original civilian accounts of the battle. And you can look and see whether there was any account that mentions the house that you're researching or the neighborhood, if there was fighting near the house, if there's a civilian who hid in the cellar of the house or vacated the house. You can find all kinds of information, and it really can help you. It can help you picture what it must have been like in your neighborhood during the battle and its aftermath, which I think is really one of the most fascinating things you can learn about your property. And just a couple other things. We have photographic holdings at the Adams County Historical Society. We have, probably at least 15,000 scanned, and you can search them on our website. So if you know the property owner, you can go on and start searching, or you can try to search by street. If you live in Gettysburg, it might be easier, or you can search by township. It is difficult to find pictures of houses, especially out in the country. A lot of people think that there were photographs taken of every house, but that's just not the case. Some houses weren't photographed until the 1940s, 50s, or 60s. So it's kind of a needle in the haystack with photographs, but sometimes people are lucky and find a photograph of their house or of something nearby or something from a distance that shows their house, including the panoramic views that were taken after the Battle of Gettysburg. If you live in the town, a lot of houses can be seen in those images. Somebody asked how the civilian accounts are filed. That's a good question. So they are alphabetical by last name. So you kind of have to know who you're looking for. One day we're hoping to put them onto a map so that you can see where people live and how they may move around during the battle, and if they're writing about a certain location. You can see that too. And then again, I mentioned it already, but newspapers, really one of the gems that we have access to at the Historical Society is the full run of the Gettysburg Times, the Gettysburg Compiler, the Star and Sentinel, the Adams Sentinel, just about every newspaper that was ever published. Some are available online. Most are on newspapers.com, but we have the originals, and we have a lot of editions that are not searchable. So it's a good idea to come in and do research with us when we open back up, hopefully sooner rather than later. So if you visit, I am certain we've never really turned anybody away empty-handed if they own a property or are researching a property in the county. We can help you find information. It is not always going to be as exciting as, shells passing through the roof and the family fleeing in distress during the battle. But you might find something really meaningful, and I think a lot of people can connect to property history and the history of a house that they live in or, pass by every day. A lot of people, even who don't like history very much, find ways to relate to history if it's a part of their lives. And so that's something that we have a lot of fun with at the Historical Society, which is connecting people with their history. As somebody asked for our address, it is 368 Springs Avenue, Gettysburg. And we are temporarily closed, obviously, because of the virus. So you should watch our website and our Facebook page for announcements about reopening. I think that's it. Just one quick plug, if you haven't already visited our website, please check it out. You can become a member there, especially because of all that's going on. We really would appreciate having your support now and your membership. So if you enjoyed this presentation, I hope you'll consider hopping onto our website. We have a Support Us tab, and you can become a member of the Historical Society today. We have all kinds of programs, a lot of members-only opportunities, and we have a lot of exciting things coming. We are working hard on a project right now to build a new facility that will properly house the incredible, and really vast holdings of the Historical Society. And so I hope that you'll join us and stick with us. And we'll have some really exciting things to share with you probably over the next year to a year and a half as things progress. But we're working hard to keep all of this history accessible, and we'll be bringing more of these programs to you over the next few months or weeks, depending on how long this lasts. So thank you so much for tuning in. If there's any questions, we'll still monitor the comments on this video, so please feel free to leave any questions with us. But I hope all of you have a very good night, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. We will hopefully be hearing from you and interacting with you again soon. So thank you very much.